sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. Today's Friday, our weekend edition, where we cover a number of topics that happened during the past week of relevance, and it has been a sad week. Joining me in studio is Jeff Mateer. He's Senior Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, and Chief Operating Officer of First Liberty, and Erin Smith, who's Associate Counsel at First Liberty. And folks, we'll start out just by mentioning today's September the 12th. September the 11th was yesterday, the 24th anniversary of the 2001 attack. Next year will be the 25th anniversary. We'll probably have more things happening then. A lot of reminiscences, people going and just remembering that happening 24 years ago. A sad event, but this has been a week of sad events. So we'll start by talking a little bit about Charlie Kirk. The good news is we're hearing that they have, the police, I think about 10 o'clock last night, arrested Tyler Robinson. They think he is the suspect. They've got some good reasons to think that, and I believe I just saw that his father mentioned that he had confessed to his father that he had been the killer in that. But my goodness, Jeff, we've got so many. This has just sort of consumed the country with the killing of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I know when I first heard, I was downtown at something on my way back. We were having an event at First Liberty that afternoon, and then I think as I was coming back, I got the news that he had been shot. And then later, in the middle of our event at First Liberty, we learned that he had been murdered and died from the gunshot wounds. And I'll tell you, it's somebody, and obviously, Erin and I are by no means have the same sort of exposure that Charlie Kirk has, but we do speak in public. We certainly speak on issues that are 50-50 issues at best, and standing up for truth and standing up for principle. And we've all been. And I shared this as I was coming back on Wednesday. I was at an event in downtown Dallas, and I had a young man that gave my talk, and a young man asked a question at the end. And it was a question about transgenderism, and I answered the question, and then the event host concluded. That young man came up to me, and that's fine after the talk, and then I was running late because I had to get back for this First Liberty event, and said, "Yeah, appreciate that." I actually gave him my business card. Said, "Yeah, look, just call me." But he walked with me down the stairs of the building, onto the street, into the parking garage where I had parked. And, I at the time didn't think of anything of it, but I think of the world we live in. You can't be 100% safe, but this is where we live now. We live in this culture, and we don't want to have a culture of fear. Obviously, we can't shut down. We need to engage in the public debate. But we can't run away from it, and I know Charlie Kirk wouldn't want us to. His adult life has been engaging in these issues, but I think it's a wake up call. It's a wake up call on so many different levels. It starts with our college campuses, but it also starts with when you have, and it seems to be mainly people on the left vilifying people on the right. And it's a biblical principle. You reap what you sow, and when you reap, when you're expressing that much hate, then I guess we shouldn't be surprised that things like this happen.
Erin, I'm a member of the Federalist Society speaking group, as a number of First Liberty people are.
As I am.
And First Liberty people. And I've gone to university campuses and spoke there. And these are oftentimes controversial. You're taking the Federalist Society likes to get both sides, so you have two people sort of engaging in a debate. And, a lot of young people were there. I never had the problem that was there. And I like being able to go into an area where you have people with differing opinion, and then you can discuss it. I enjoy doing that. But if you have these situations continue, and you're the closest one we have to having been in college, if you can't go to a college and speak, you can't get that sort of awareness of other people's ideas.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And one of the first things I did when I got to law school was go find the Federalist Society table, because I knew that's a place where speech was welcome and where we were going to debate ideas. This horrible thing that happened, it's sobering because I was at that university not too long ago speaking on a panel about First Amendment rights. Beautiful campus. And, you just don't expect something like that to happen. But I 100% agree. It's so important that we're having these conversations in college. I learned so much about what I believe and what my friends believe in college because we were having those conversations, and people were not afraid to discuss it, say their opinion. You can agree to disagree and move on. And that's something that I think we've lost as a society, is the ability to just say, you know what, you are entitled to your opinion. I think you're wrong. But I don't hate you because of what you just said to me. You're allowed to believe what you believe. And it's my job I'm going to try to change your mind. But if I can't change your mind at the end of the day, then we can move on as friends or as colleagues at the very least.
Jeff, I used to like to go, I use the term enemy. The enemy is not really the right term. I used to like to go into places where people just disagreed with me. And one of the things I appreciate about Charlie Kirk is he did that as well. One of the things I appreciated about Senator Rand Paul, he would go speak to black groups and other things, NAACP and places where Republicans don't typically accept speaking engagements, in order to be able to get in front of other people and convey your message and hear them and be able to express it. And we'll lose something if we can't do that again. I
mean, it's such a rich part of the American tradition, but also the English tradition, right? We think about Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, right? And so the whole fact you have somebody get up and you engage in debate. What is more American than engaging in debate? But I think we've got we have this atmosphere that have been created on college campuses by liberal left-wing administrators that has shut down hate, has shut down speech, and it really is because of hate. And so I think this atmosphere. I mean, there's a lot to think about, on what occurred. But I don't want to live in America where we can't engage in debate.
It's an important point, because people who were speaking on the right in universities, Riley Gaines oftentimes got chased out of a room. I don't remember that happening to left-wing speakers, but it did happen to right-wing speakers fairly often. And the police would have to be called in. Then sometimes they had to have to lock themselves in a room just to protect themselves from the people who were not as serious as what happened to Charlie Kirk, but you weren't entirely sure if you ended up getting in those people's way and got too close to him. We've been talking about Charlie Kirk, the assassination. We do have a number of articles on pointofview.net. I have one from First Liberty Institute where they have several sort of reminiscences of him from people who knew him, worked with him, and so forth. So I'd encourage you to go there. You'll get several perspectives from that. We also have a link on the Point of View website about President Trump's speech on this. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Tanita Maddox is the National Director for Generational Impact for Young Life and author of the book, What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. She was on my radio program recently to share her research and insights. Her investigation began when she began to ask if she was being effective in ministry anymore. She saw panic attacks at events, students filled with anxiety, and open hostility to faiths that she had never seen. Ministry that she had done in the past was not effective, and she was concerned that her ministry was becoming irrelevant. Many people in ministry do not realize how disconnected this generation is from the church and any religious perspective. Those that did grow up in a Christian environment, according to the Survey Center for American Life, are leaving their faith at younger ages than previous generations. We might even wonder what faith they are leaving. The Jesus Survey discovered that most Gen Z Christians agree that Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha, and other belief systems and religions all have equal value. And many studies show that Gen Z isn't so much hostile to religion as they simply aren't interested in religion. The core of her book is an attempt at answering the 7 questions Gen Z ask. They are, is God good? Am I enough? Will you accept me? Do all people matter to God? Can I trust you? What is true? And am I safe? She devotes a chapter to each question with her answers. We've heard it said on many occasions that Christians and the church are often answering questions a generation isn't asking and ignoring questions that should be answered. That is true for Gen Z, and one of the reasons I recommend the book. We need to learn how to reach this generation. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. Joining me in studio, Jeff Mateer and Erin Smith, both with the First Liberty Institute. And we're talking right now about Charlie Kirk and the situation there. The president went on the air, delivered about a 4.5-minute speech. We've got a link to that on our website, pointofview.net. But it sort of exemplifies how this has captured the nation in so many ways. And one of the things you sometimes ask, is there any silver lining that comes out of these things, these tragic incidents? And one of the things is Charlie Kirk's faith has been mentioned several times as his pastor, and others have talked about that. And it becomes a real testimony to people out there, Erin.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously this story is getting a lot of attention, as it should. People should be aware that this happened, that it wasn't okay what happened. But one positive that people are taking away from this was that Charlie knew his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And that brings a lot of peace to believers, knowing he is in a much better place than the world that we're sitting in right now. And I hope that people hearing the story that don't know the gospel start asking questions and start wondering, how can people be at such peace with what happened? I mean, this is awful. And I hope that they ask questions and they go find someone and ask questions. Well, what did Charlie Kirk believe? Why is his family okay? And I do hope and trust that the Lord, will use Charlie's story and his death to grow the church.
It's an interesting point because I'd been on the BBC a few times in England. They televised me doing on welfare reform, and I was talking to the producer here a few years back, and he said, "With all the things going on there in the States, how do you are you concerned about the future and so forth?" I said, "Well, maybe a little bit, but at the same time, we have faith." And I was able to use it as an opportunity to witness to somebody who is concerned about the future. Future may not be good, but we know what our future is. And so there may be millions of people who have not heard the testimony of the faith of Jesus Christ that Charlie had, Jeff, that now at least get a sense of that, and maybe there'll be something good to come from that.
No, I think absolutely, and I think the nation is turned in right now, right? I mean, there's, if you look at the media, There's nothing but wall-to-wall coverage about this, and I think that brings attention. I think, as I understand it, the president will attend his service, his memorial service, his funeral, and that will bring. I mean, obviously, when Donald Trump shows up, that brings even more attention. And I would say I have had the chance to meet him. Charlie did quite a number of things with First Liberty. And so I've had a little bit of interaction with them, and was always I was struck. There's sometimes people have a public personality, and then they've got how they are in one-on-one private. And what I found was Charlie was very engaging, and that faith and his faith came across. And Kelly Shackelford knew him a lot better and had more one-on-one dealings with him. And I know he's always spoken very, very highly of Charlie, and his faith came in. And trust me, the world we live in. If there was something inconsistent and wrong about that, I mean, the world would know, because the left would. I mean, there's people like that are very much under the microscope, and so I think that's a positive, and I think it is a positive. I know I got a text of all people. I have a young 16-year-old niece who we had never talked about Charlie Kirk, and she sent me. She sent me a text on Wednesday evening, and about how she had been. I mean, and so another person influenced, and literally, I think there are, thousands, tens of thousands of young people who were influenced by Charlie Kirk, and influenced in a positive manner. And the media wants to talk about is getting them involved in politics, which he certainly has. But I also think he has gotten them all, exposed them to the gospel. And obviously, around this table, we know that that's the most important thing, the most eternal thing.
I know that in some of his debates and discussions, he was sometimes asked about his faith, and he talked about why he believed the Bible, why he put his faith in there, why he thought the Bible was trustworthy, and so forth. And so he was able to share that message. So it wasn't all political. And I know Kelly Shackelford released a statement that you released at First Liberty, and we have a link to that. And Kelly just wanted to express his thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, Kelly called him a friend, and he was a friend, and knew him as a person who was motivated, like a lot of us. That why do we do what we do? Why do Erin and I? Why are we involved in the fight for religious liberty? Well, we're motivated. We're motivated at our core because of our faith. I mean, for us, it is a calling, and it's a calling. And I mean, I talk about our work we do. I mean, our job is we do what we do, representing people of all faiths, but so that truth can be proclaimed, and we're not afraid of debate because we know truth. I think Charlie Kirk was exactly the same way.
And even though we're talking about all the people who appreciated his efforts, not everybody did. Yeah. And it turns out that there was some people discussing it in a unacceptable way on Blue Sky, which is a sort of a social media thing. So my understanding is Blue Sky was started by people who had worked at Twitter. Once Elon Musk took over, they created their own, and they wanted to make it open. It has become a left-leaning place for people to go and express. And Blue Sky had to shut down some of them because apparently so many people on Blue Sky were excited, rejoicing, and other things, claiming this was worth. He should have been killed, and so forth. So it was not a good situation on Blue Sky. And I understand some of the other social media things had to shut down some of the people who were talking, praising the killing.
Yeah, I mean, as a good Calvinist, it's the first T in TULIP. I mean, what more evidence do we need for total depravity than who celebrates someone's murder? I did not watch the clip. Someone described it to me, and then I decided I didn't need to see it. But after having described anyone celebrating that, I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand it other than Calvin was right. And it's really not Calvin. The Bible is right. Man is totally depraved. And if you, in your sinful nature, that's the only thing that makes sense for me with that, because how you can celebrate that, whether it be someone, on the right who's assassinated, or it's children shot in schools or it's someone I would not understand. I do not understand that.
And Aaron, it's not the first one we've seen celebrated. Brian Thompson, who was the CEO of United Healthcare, was assassinated on the streets of New York. What was it, about a year and a half or so ago? A person came up, shot him in the back, and he got that assassin got all kinds of praise from people out there, even suggesting he should be a saint, he should be commended, all kinds of things, praising that assassination because he was head of a large health insurance company.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Jeff. It doesn't make sense unless you understand human nature. How people could laud these murderers as heroes. Because Charlie Kirk was not just a political activist. He was a husband and father. And my heart breaks for his wife and kids that will now have to grow up without a dad, his wife that will have to move on without a husband. And the same goes for, a CEO of a giant corporation. That man had a family too. And anyone murdered, that should not be something that's celebrated in the streets, celebrated by elected representatives, celebrated by anyone. I mean, I don't even want to go on X right now because it's so negative. I mean, even people drawing good attention to people that are celebrating this in order to say these people need to be held accountable for what they're saying. It's still showing up for people that are trying to avoid it and not give any support or credence, right? By paying attention, we're suddenly heightening it. And so, yeah, it just makes me completely sick.
Well, one person held accountable is one of the commentators on MSNBC. Apparently, I saw some of the comments he made, and essentially he said Charlie Kirk stirs up all this hate, so it sort of inflames this, and his getting killed would be somewhat other justified. But he was let go from there. It was so bad that MSNBC could not take it. So there is some pushback at times, and I think it was a good statement on MSNBC doing that. We've been talking about Charlie Kirk and the tragic death that's happening there. He was not the only person to die recently in a very unusual and tragic way, and we just want to bring that up too when we come back on the air. So we've got material on Charlie Kirk on the Point of View website, so I'd encourage you to go to pointofview.net. You can also hit the donate button while you're there. And when we come back, we'll talk about another tragic killing that happened in North Carolina. Kind of got taken off the headlines once Charlie Kirk died.
America's founding was shaped by a biblical worldview, but you will rarely hear that truth today. Think about this. If your child or grandchild was asked to articulate how Christian values shaped America's founding based on the education they received in school and from popular media, could they do it? Well, you can be part of restoring an appreciation for America's godly heritage, and we need you. Truth Team Week is right around the corner, kicking off September 22nd, and you're invited to participate in Point of View's mission to restore America's godly heritage and a Christian worldview in this nation by joining the Truth Team. But you don't have to wait to make a difference. You can make a donation right now and learn more about the Truth Team by visiting us online at pointofview.net. or by calling 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And welcome back to Point of View. Joining me in studio is Jeff Mateer and Erin Smith, both of the First Liberty Institute. And we've been talking about the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I just wanted to read this summary from Politico, sort of summarizing the political violence that's happened over the last 2 years. So it says, since the two assassination attempts against Trump last summer, we've seen the killing of a healthcare executive in New York, that was Brian Thompson we talked about a minute ago, attacks on the DNC building in Arizona and the Republican Party headquarters in New Mexico, the firebombing of a Democratic governor's home in Pennsylvania, the killing of 2 Israeli embassy workers here in D.C., the firebombing of a peace march for Israel hostages in Colorado, and the shooting of the Democratic state legislators and their spouses in Minnesota, and now Charlie Kirk. So the political violence has ramped up significantly, and we don't always remember some of these things that have happened a little while back because we move on. But it's not just the political violence against violence against political people, because we had this amazing, terrible attack in Charlotte, North Carolina, which had been an issue for a little while, but then it went off the front pages. It was Irina, I'm going to call it Zarutska, who was a Ukrainian national. She came to the U.S. to get away from the violence in Ukraine, and on August 22nd, she was on a subway in Charlotte, North Carolina, and was attacked and killed. And we didn't hear much about it until just a little bit earlier this week, when people started saying, why are we not getting much media attention to this? It seems like this is such a blatant killing. Why aren't we hearing more about it? And there are explanations for that, or at least speculations about that. But Jeff, this was a terrible killing.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's more shocking than what occurred with Charlie Kirk. I mean,
because she doesn't provoke anything. She's just sitting on a subway.
This is just a young girl, and we've all. I mean, again, the world we live in, you see these images, right? Mm-hmm. And you can watch it. And she's just sitting there doing nothing. And I when I first saw, I think the first thing, I looked up and saw a monitor that had it on. And I'm assuming, this is like the subway in New York, right? I mean, so I'm going to do some New York bashing, which is always in season to bash New York. But this is Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yes.
This is Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, that to me sounds like Dallas, where we're sitting. And this young lady simply doing nothing, just sitting there. And who, as you said, buddy, came here because she's escaping violence, but finds it in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a little uncomfortable with the president, because I think have an article from Fox News where the president calls for the death penalty and the trial to be quick. Mm-hmm. Presidents really shouldn't. They don't really need to say things like that.
They don't need to weigh in on this,
because let's let the process go through. I mean, it's pretty clear who the guilty party is, and maybe that's in Trump's defense. Maybe that's it. Really doesn't matter. But this guy needs to go through the process. He should receive the full extent of punishment. Hopefully, North Carolina does have the death penalty. Because, as Trump said in his post, this is like someone who's an animal. Mm-hmm. This is an animal. So it's troubling on so many levels. And the first thing that it happened in Charlotte, North Carolina, just is mind-boggling.
Erin, I believe the suspect had a criminal history and has been in and out of the system several times. And it raises the point of Trump mentioning that he wants to get rid of cashless bail. He wants people to be able to have to put up bail if they're getting out of jail, because this has been an accusation for some time that people, especially in New York, they'll say they catch somebody, they've done something terrible, they go before the judge, and they're out almost immediately with no bail. And if there's no penalty and there's no way to restrain them, they go back out and begin acting violently again.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I was at First Liberty, I did criminal appellate prosecution for a little bit. And so, I have read a lot of facts, a lot of horrible facts, and this ranks right among the top of them as far as just brutal and also senseless. But yeah, I think this just draws attention, like you're saying, to this catch and release type style of we're going to, we catch them, we punish them, maybe we slap them on the wrist, or, maybe they're awaiting trial and they're going to go back out onto the streets. And this should bring to people's mind, it matters who you are electing as your district attorney. It matters who you are putting in political office, who's setting these sorts of rules around criminal punishment and what happens while people are either awaiting trial or what the punishment is for specific crimes. I mean, people are not powerless to change, to make these changes and to strengthen and reform our criminal justice systems. And so this is drawing attention to an issue that we've been trying to draw attention to for a long time. And I think, we've seen the fallout in New York, watch the fallout across California, because it's also in style to bash California when you get the opportunity. So apparently you're not exempt in Charlotte, North Carolina either. And so we need to be paying attention to the criminal prosecutors.
I'll just add, we talk about California and New York, but it's also, Harris County has, the bail system's broken in Harris County, Texas. And so I think a lot of major cities where you have a policy of,
and these are mostly blue cities, wouldn't they?
They're not mostly. I think they're exclusively blue cities. And there's a broken system when someone with this type of record, who I think at least Fox News reported that there were even criminal charges filed this year against him, and he remained out despite having a pretty long record that dates back over 10 years. Someone who commits that type of crime, that violent, that unprovoked, has clearly got some issues. Now those issues do not forgive, and we don't say, oh, he just, he has mental health, and so let's just. This is just brutal, and someone like this should have never been on. Someone who has the capacity to commit a crime like this should have never been on the streets, because what was the motive? The motive is unknown, other than you had a white young woman sitting in a light rail train minding her own business, and it just the whole issue of bail across the country and this cashless release is a problem nationally. And it's not isolated to Charlotte or New York or California. It's everywhere.
And, President Trump has been highlighting this. And, of course, he brought the National Guard and troops out into D.C. I believe that 30-day period ended a day or two ago, and that Congress had not extended it. But he's been highlighting the fact that a lot of these blue cities have just terrible crime rates, and the mayors come out and defend it, but it's you don't want to live in some of these cities just because of the crime rates, especially in certain areas in the cities.
No, I think when you're looking at jobs, where a job might take you, you're looking at the city and you're thinking, is that a place I really want to live? Or you're thinking, I'd like to have a family. Is this a place where I want my kids to grow up? Do I feel safe with them in the community? Or if they have to go on their own to walk to school, are they going to be okay? And these are questions that people of all ages are asking. Am I safe in the city that I live in? And a lot of people are going to start, and have already started, leaving these places to go in search of somewhere where the law is upheld and where criminals are punished.
Jeff, a lot of people criticize President Trump for what he did in Washington, D.C., but I heard the streets got quiet, the criminals stayed inside, and things seemed to move a little more smoothly. And I've been to Washington, D.C. many, many times, and at some point, there's certain areas of the city you don't really want to walk in. And so having that tamed down and under control would be helpful.
No, I think exactly. Washington, D.C. is so important to tourists. And you want to have a safe place where people want to come visit our nation's capital. But the truth is, every city should feel that way. I think about public transit, where this crime was committed. Who uses public transit? Well, almost disproportionately, it's going to be lower income and probably minority because of lower income. And it needs to be safe so people feel like they can use it. There's certainly certain public transit systems that I would feel uncomfortable in certain places. I have in the past used the DC one, although I've heard, again, prior to the Trump cleanup, I've heard that that had become a little sketchy. New York is always, I've ridden the New York subway.
I have too.
But that can always, depending on, if you're in Manhattan, it's fine. Going outside Manhattan, I don't know. But maybe we get some New Yorkers to call and defend New York. Doubtful.
Stay with us. We'll be back on Point of View.
The Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce engagement has some people wondering, will marriage by the world's most famous millennial feminist accelerate the recent modest reversal of the decline in marriage rates? The Wall Street Journal's James Freeman wrote recently of a marriage comeback. He cites data that suggests that the decades-long decline in the proportion of Americans who are married may have reached its low point. Having hit that nadir during the pandemic, the 2023 marriage rate was higher than in any year since 2008. Could the Swift-Kelce union spawn a marriage boom? Certainly theirs is the ultimate capstone marriage, as described in a Washington Post column by Ramesh Pandaru. He points to sociologist Andrew Cherlin's description of a trend in which the wedding is the last brick put in place in a good life. As nice as it is for a couple to have their financial ducks in a row before marriage, there are downsides for the couple and for the culture. According to Mr. Pandaru, one is that fewer people get married. Not everyone achieves a capstone, and the people who do spend a smaller fraction of their lives married. Social scientists tell us married people are happier, and later marriages mean fewer children, often fewer than couples say they want. Of those, more are born outside of wedlock. In contrast, cornerstone marriage provides one of the first bricks of adulthood, where husband and wife do some of their growing up together. In our culture, well-educated, economically successful couples are the ones most likely to get married. But that Taylor Swift, an icon of female independence, will be married might just encourage a marriage boom, hopefully with more cornerstone marriages, perhaps even a baby boom. At age 35, if Taylor and Travis want kids, they ought to start soon. Travis's father, Ed Kelce, sounded optimistic when he spoke of the couple's shared values, strong work ethic, and future family goals. I'm rooting for them. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back with our weekend edition. Joining me in studio, Jeff Mateer and Erin Smith of the First Liberty Institute. And we'll change course now to talk about some of the numbers that are out there, because we've got some encouraging and some less than encouraging numbers over the past week. One, we heard that the consumer price index, Producer Price Index, the one we got on Wednesday, had declined by 0.1%. That was unexpected. And then when the Consumer Price Index came out on Thursday, it had increased by 0.4%, putting us up to about a 2.9% inflation from this time last year. And that's higher than the Fed's target of a 2% inflation, but it hadn't hit 3 yet. And it's still, in all it's still really pretty low compared to what some of the other countries are living with, but it's also higher, and that puts the Federal Reserve Bank meets next week. They've got to deal with some of this stuff, and they are looking at this. They're getting a lot of pressure from President Trump to lower the interest rates. If you get a higher inflation rate, as we did from the CPI, then they don't want to raise interest rates if the inflation is going up too much. The general betting right now is there'll be a 1% or a quarter point reduction in the interest rate this time, maybe another one again in October, and maybe another again in December, but that'll depend upon the inflation rate. And I'll tell you, folks, I hear from people all the time, and they just, including my wife, who talk about how high prices have been getting for them. And so I was a little surprised. I've been looking for this inflation rate to go up. Hadn't gone up as much as I would have thought it would have.
Yeah, a lot of the words that you just said, right over my head. But no, I mean, I go to the grocery store.
Did you not take economics in college?
No, no, I didn't have to take economics. I managed to somehow dodge that class very skillfully.
I
might add.
Oklahoma State, how economics,
we had agriculture economics at Oklahoma State, and I look at my grocery list. It seems to me to be higher than it was last year. I don't know if that's because I buy fancier milk, then, I've gotten used to a higher standard of milk, I suppose. I don't know if it's because I'm trying to up my protein intake. Those things add to the grocery bill. But, for things like gas to drive, it's not really gotten any better. And, for regular groceries, I mean, you have 8 items in your cart. And suddenly you're paying $100. Yep. And I don't know how it got there, but it did. And I need to eat. So, you kind of just suffer.
Well, Jeff, in Erin's defense, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a degree in economics
That's true.
From Boston University.
Trust me, Erin understands it a lot better than AOC.
Hey,
I have no doubt about that.
sat in front of someone I'm not going to say who, in a class, I'm not going to say whether it was in college or law school, that had an economics degree from the University of Oklahoma that said, why don't we just print more money? And I put my head down and said, I have a constitutional law final to take.
Yeah. So we've had an uptick in inflation, at least from the consumer price index, but we had a downtick in jobs as the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and said they revised their job estimate from April of last year through March of this year. And what happens is they do these monthly job estimates, but then at the end of their fiscal year that they're looking at, they then go and look at unemployment claims and so forth, and then they try to harmonize those. And they said, well, we think we added nearly a million fewer jobs last year, which seems like a lot. To downgrade that. And plus, the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out saying that we only added 27,000 jobs in the last month. And I think it averaged about 22,000 jobs a month for the summer, which is a major change. And it highlights this issue of, is President Trump right that we're not getting good economic numbers? Because he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics a month ago when she came out with low jobs numbers. And he's got a person that he's appointed to do this. But we really need accurate numbers on our jobs. I've generally defended the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but some of these revisions that we're seeing there makes you wonder, are they really doing as good a job as they could?
Well, and where are they using it? Because you're thinking this is not the numbers that are being revised were up in order apparently to support the Biden-Harris administration, right? It wasn't as bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was worse, is what we now know. And so what were they being used to, let's prop them up and then we'll fix it later, which is apparently what happened. But no, I mean, I think we need to have reliable data. I think everyone is in agreement on that. And if people are using the data or manipulating the data for political purposes, then that's a very serious. And so to the extent the president is asking, we need to get to the bottom of this and figure out what the real numbers are and stop the politics. Now, what I hope is he's not doing it on the other side, right? And so he wants, I only want good data. Well, no, Only tell me the good news, and I don't want to hear any bad news. Well, if there's bad news, we want to know the bad news too. So, yeah, that revision. That's not a small revision.
No, it's not.
And
they do revise these things, and sometimes there's large ones. But William Beach, who used to be head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and was at the Heritage Foundation at one time, I heard him on the radio defending generally that the head of the Bureau doesn't have any control of this, that the people who are crunching these numbers bring it to the head, already done. This is our numbers, and the head has to go with it, the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But the Department of Labor, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics is under the Department of Labor, has initiated an investigation into these efforts to see if they're doing the right. Are they doing the right thing? Or are they doing as good a job as they can? I have heard that I think about a third of the higher-ranking members in the BLS are no longer there. They've got a shortage of employees, in part because of people being able to leave voluntarily and other things. So they may be under some pressure to do this, and a lot of this is just basic work. You sit and you call. They have thousands of businesses that they call every month to ask, what are you doing in your job hiring? What does it look like for you? And they take this information and then they try to compile their numbers that they give for us. But if you have these major revisions, it's probably time to look at it. And over the years, especially with numbers like the uninsured rate, I've generally given the people that do that, the Census Bureau, kind of a pass, saying even if they're not getting the numbers exactly right, they do it over years. They use the same process, so you sort of can know a trend as to whether or not the numbers are going up or going down, even if the actual numbers are not quite right. And I've generally said the same thing with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But we're going to have the Department of Labor go in, do an investigation, and we'll see what comes from that, because we need to have good numbers on this, because so much depends on these. Business hiring, just a range of different things as to what, and the Fed. If the Fed thinks inflation is going up and that's not right, then they may be raising interest rates or keeping them the same because they think inflation is going up. If that's wrong, it's hurting the economy. On the other hand, if the jobs are going down and they weren't aware of that, they should be cutting the interest rate in order to be able to support the economy, because it looks like we've got a bad jobs market out there. Everything we're seeing right now looks like hiring is slowing. Companies are just kind of holding steady right now, thinking we don't know how the economy is going to go over the next year, especially with the tariffs and other things. So got to get the numbers right. We're the gold standard out there. Nobody does it as well as we do, and we don't want to become China in manipulating our numbers or even have that reputation. We've been talking about things that are going on here in the country on our weekend edition on Point of View. When we come back, we've got several more things to talk about, including the SCOTUS appeal to the Supreme Court for Trump's tariffs. We'll see what happens with that and discuss that when we come back here on Point of View.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today as we go through our weekend edition, where we look at issues and incidents happening over the past week. We've been talking about Charlie Kirk and the assassination there, and generally just the growing political violence in the country. If you'd like to ask a question or you have a comment, give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. 1-800-351-1212. The phones are open. Joining me in studio is Jeff Mateer. He's the Senior Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, and Chief Operating Officer at First Liberty Institute, and also Erin Smith. She's Associate Counsel. And, we've been talking just about some of the economics that we've seen in the recently over the past week. Some of the things, inflation, jobs and so forth, some part good, some part bad. And now one of the things sort of affecting that are the tariffs. And the Supreme Court is apparently decided to accept on expedited review President Trump appeal to from the appeals court, I think, in Washington, D.C. So Trump has been taking his tariffs to the various courts. He took it first to the Court of International Trade. They decided unanimously against his tariffs, saying that the vast majority of them are illegal. He can't do that. He decided he wanted to go to the Supreme Court. They said, not just yet, and so he took it to the appeals court. He decided the appeals court ruled against him, and so now they made an expedited appeal to the Supreme Court to look at that. And the interesting thing about this, they're doing this under a bill referred to as IEPA, which gives the president certain powers in emergency situations to be able to impose, to be able to respond to countries. It doesn't use the word tariffs, but generally in the past, the Congress has given the president certain powers, limited powers, temporary powers to act, because Congress can sometimes take a long time to act. And you may need to have a president being able to act fairly quickly in something. But his tariffs have not been short, and they haven't been small. They haven't been temporary. And so it's taking it to the Supreme Court. And Jeff, we'll see what the Supreme Court says. But I know that the president and the Secretary of Commerce has said that if they take these away, they're going to have to pay back all these tariffs they've taken in, which is about $160 billion.
Yeah, that would be a big penalty, and I think let's hope. Well, that could be very troubling if that happens. The court's taking this, and again, it's taking it. This is on its emergency docket, and which I think in itself presents some challenges. So just
explain that.
Well, because a couple of the justices do not like the emergency docket. And there have actually been cases in which justices have ruled against a party on the emergency docket, but later, as it's come up through the normal process, they've ruled in favor. And so, for instance, Justice Barrett is one of them. Justice Barrett apparently does not like the emergency docket because the cases, they feel like the cases need to go through the whole process to be fully briefed, to be well argued. I mean, there's a reason we have that appellate. The fact that the court has agreed to take it would indicate, well, that they want to take it. They want to take it now. But don't forget, you only need 4 justices to take a case. You need 5 justices voting in your favor to win. And sometimes you'll have justices vote to take a case And then that doesn't mean they're going to rule in your favor. They just want the court to hear the case. So that gives me some pause that it's going up on the emergency docket. The other is, this is one I think you and I have been on the show. We've talked about this before. I am a textualist. I read the language of the act. And John Sawyer is the solicitor in the United States. And I did look at some of his briefing previously. And John's making the best argument that can be made. But here's what that John has to convince 5 Supreme Court justices, that this is an unusual and extraordinary threat, and that this is a time of a national emergency, and that then therefore the president can unilaterally, without Congress, enact tariffs, which historically tariffs are enacted by an act of Congress signed by the president. Because they're a tax. And last time I checked on this is sort of like why we left the Great Britain and England. So it's a hard argument under normal circumstances, but in the emergency docket, knowing that you've got Justice Barrett primarily, but Justice Kavanaugh as well, who normally might be a little more sympathetic to the administration's argument, certainly Kavanaugh coming out of it. I just think it's going to be a really hard. I get that they took the case, but it may just be we took the case because we weren't done with it.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll find out the first week. Well, we'll find out in arguments the first week of November. One would think then we would have a decision by the end of the year.
And, Aaron, I could see why. I could make a case for the Supreme Court taking this on the emergency docket because, you've got the countries collecting billions of dollars from individuals, and Trump has essentially sort of upended the whole international trading system as countries are trying to figure out how to manipulate. Companies all over the world are moving to other countries that might have lower tariffs, which may not be lower next week if Trump decided to change and decided to charge them more. So it seems to me to make a good case that you needed to get this done quickly because it's so disruptive right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about how much money that is being collected and the amount that could have to be paid back. I don't envy the lawyers that are having to brief this on an expedited schedule. Opening briefs are due September 19th, which is next Friday. And so things are going to move, relatively quickly. Who knows how fast the court will rule after argument, but presumably because it's on a quick schedule, we'll have a ruling, and they, like you said, need to address this, or maybe they believe they need to address this because of the amount of money, because of the relationships with other countries, because they need to tell either President Trump, yes, you can do this, or they need to go to Congress and say, you need to be the ones doing this if this is your power that's written in the Constitution, because we don't see this as an unusual and extraordinary threat.
Yeah, Jeff, one of the things that I think Congress has ceded a lot of its power to the president, and I don't think that's a good thing in many cases.
No, not at all. That's not. That's not what the Constitution says, and I think it was the U.S. I think the federal court of the U.S. Federal Circuit, the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, said basically, when Congress, in order to give this authority to the president, they have to do so. They actually have to say it, and it's just not there. And I wonder whether or not the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill was such a political play, strong. Why did he not just add this in? That may have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but at the same time, so much easier just to have gotten congressional authorization. And maybe he gets it through that bill, and then we don't have this discussion.
Yeah, because right now he doesn't have that authorization, and it's a very sweeping policy. So stay with us. We'll be back on Point of View in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Tanita Maddox is the National Director for Generational Impact for Young Life and author of the book, What Gen Z Really Wants to Know About God. She was on my radio program recently to share her research and insights. Her investigation began when she began to ask if she was being effective in ministry anymore. She saw panic attacks at events, students filled with anxiety, and open hostility to faith that she had never seen. Ministry that she had done in the past was not effective, and she was concerned that her ministry was becoming irrelevant. Many people in ministry do not realize how disconnected this generation is from the church and any religious perspective. Those that did grow up in a Christian environment, according to the Survey Center for American Life, are leaving their faith at younger ages than previous generations. We might even wonder what faith they are leaving. The Jesus survey discovered that most Gen Z Christians agree that Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha, and other belief systems and religions all have equal value. And many studies show that Gen Z isn't so much hostile to religion as they simply aren't interested in religion. The core of her book is an attempt at answering the 7 questions Gen Z ask. They are, is God good? Am I enough? Will you accept me? Do all people matter to God? Can I trust you? What is true? And am I safe? She devotes a chapter to each question with her answers. We've heard it said on many occasions that Christians and the church are often answering questions a generation isn't asking and ignoring questions that should be answered. That is true for Gen Z, and one of the reasons I recommend the book. We need to learn how to reach this generation. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. If you've got a comment or a question about Point of View, about what we've been talking about, especially the Charlie Kirk assassination, 1-800-351-1212. You can give us a call. The phones are open, 1-800-351-1212. And the last segment, we were talking about the Supreme Court. And in this particular case, Trump's effort to take to appeal to the Supreme Court about his tariffs. It's been losing at the other court levels, and now he wants to take it to the Supreme Court where it needed to go, and they've decided to expedite this, and we'll see hopefully fairly soon what we can find out about that. But speaking of courts, First Liberty's got some issues with the courts, and Jeff, I think you've got some good news about one.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty amazing. It happened a little over a week ago, but we got an order. We've been bashing New York, so let's.
Good for you.
So now we're not going to bash them because we're going to praise a New York judge. So a New York judge awarded us a tremendous amount of attorney's fees for us and our co-counsel, our volunteer attorneys, over $800,000 in attorney's fees. I mean,
really?
That's money, buddy.
Yes,
$800,000 is money. And what's interesting, this is a case that we won at the district court and then won at the Second Circuit. No appeal to the Supreme Court. New York had enacted a law that prohibited firearms in churches. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to have a firearm in multiple other places, but you couldn't take your firearm into a church. And we claimed, not under the Second Amendment, but under the First Amendment, that the state has no right to regulate whether someone can bring a firearm into their church. The state cannot say no guns in a church. And District Court accepted that argument. The Second Circuit accepted that argument. And as a result, when you win a case, you win a civil rights case, you get to seek recovery or attorney's fees. And what makes this unique, there's several things in awarding this over $800,000 in attorney's fees. First, I mean, the amount it's very large. The reason it's very large is the court awarded everything we asked for, every penny that we asked for. And we had some of the best lawyers in the country working with us. The Clement Murphy firm worked with us. Paul Clement, many of the listeners will probably remember. Paul is who was former Solicitor General of the United States. He's the number one number of arguments of living people alive, living people alive. That's the same thing, isn't it? If you're probably not alive if you're not living. So he's number one arguments of anyone alive currently before the Supreme Court, and he argued most importantly our Coach Kennedy case.
And he's kind of the go-to person for conservative cases, is he not? Well,
conservative and if you had a bet your company case. And a business case in front of the Supreme Court, you would want Paul Clement. I mean, he's the best appellate advocate of my generation, and we are in the same generation. He's by far most outstanding. Getting to work with him is amazing. So, I mean, he charges, which this court now knows, in excess of $2,000 an hour, and his partner charges Erin Murphy, who is. If Paul's one, she's top 5 in advocates, and she's something like $18.50 an hour. And so, I mean, New York said, "Look, these fees are too high, right? These people are outrageous." And I was not in. I guess I didn't bill any time to this or didn't record any time to this case, so I'm not in the fee application. But Aaron's boss, David Hacker, was there, and he was awarded $14.50, and he delivers it. But for the listeners, people will remember Jeremy. Jeremy Dice got over $1,000 an hour, and that in its fact, and I know his dad listens, so I better be careful. But that in the fact that a court awarded Jeremy $1,000 an hour in itself says something. But the court recognized in a fairly lengthy opinion recognized that we are the experts, and they say we win 90% of our cases. I mean, it's sort of like, did our marketing people write this? But it's absolutely true. So it's an amazing thing when a judge actually recognizes that, yes, you guys are the experts. Yes, you're entitled to these fees. And yes, the state of New York should have never fought this case. And so for us, important in this case, but it's important in every one of our cases because it should be a reminder to local governments, to state governments, and even the federal government, that when you guys are doing something wrong, there are judges who are going to hold you accountable. And it's not just you lose the case, but you're going to be the hook for almost $1 million in attorney's fees.
So you said you did this under the First Amendment. So this is religious liberty under the First Amendment. So were you claiming that it's a religious liberty for me to bring my gun to church then? Is that essentially it?
Opposite that, you can't tell a church, government, you can't tell a church what happens inside our building. I mean, that's really the argument. We were representing the church who was being told you must prohibit firearms in your building. And our view is the government has no rule in telling a church what it can do inside its building. Think the vaccine mandate and the mask mandate. Government, no. Church, synagogue, house of worship, government, you have no rule in telling churches what they can and cannot do.
It's an interesting point because during the COVID-19, I know in our church, the state was, I don't know if it was recommending or mandating certain spaces between people who were, if you're coming back to church, you had to have 2 or 3 seats between you. I don't remember if that was a mandate or a suggestion, but would it be, if that had been a mandate, could you take that and say, you can't tell the church that we have to sit 3 seats apart even if there's a COVID?
I mean, it's the same principle, and it's actually, I think what you were initially in the state of Texas, there were such mandates, but those quickly got rescinded. When I was at the Attorney General's office, we wrote, the Attorney General wrote an opinion advising you can't do that in a church. And all those, Governor Abbott agreed to rescind all those things, and but the same sort of principles apply. I mean, the government has no role in managing the affairs of a church. There's a doctrine called the church autonomy doctrine that dates back hundreds of years. I mean, almost from the beginning of the founding, that says, it is the true, you hear the expression separation of church and state. It's actually the real meaning of separation of church and state. Keep the state out of the church. This is an example. And again, New York's not the most friendly place for religious liberty, although this was Western New York. So it was the Western District of New York. But it did go to the Second Circuit. And the Second Circuit is still has more Democrat-appointed nominees than Republican. But even at the Second Circuit, Circuit recognized that New York had gone too far.
Do you have this same issue arising in other churches around the country?
In other states?
Other states.
I think less so. This was a New York gun control measure. And I think where New York got it wrong was it becomes an easy case, just like in the COVID situation, when you allow similar non-religious organizations to do something, but then you tell religious not to do it. And so think of in the COVID, you allowed the big box stores, they were allowed to be open, but you were at the same time shutting down the churches. Here in New York, they didn't have the same law applying to other buildings, other organizations. It was directed specifically at the church. That makes it an easier case. Now, I would say, and we have a case going that's at the Supreme Court right now representing Amish families, who the state of New York has pulled all their exemptions to not COVID, all vaccines, and they're telling the Amish, your children need to be. In order to go to any school, even an Amish school, your children need to be vaccinated. Of course, the Amish have religious objections. But that's a law that is across the board. It's not directed just at religion. And that brings, the whole issue of whether if a law is general and it applies across the board to everyone, do you have a religious liberty right? Now, our position at First Liberty is you absolutely have a religious liberty right. Hopefully the Supreme Court will take that case, the Amish case, it's the Miller case, and decide that. In this case in New York, with regard to the gun laws, it wasn't across the board. It was directed at churches.
And so you won that one.
We won that one.
And where were you in the first cases, the first trials with the Amish situation?
The Amish case we've lost twice.
Oh.
Yeah, and we've actually been hired to take it to the Supreme Court. So we didn't lose. Someone else lost, but they brought us in to help.
Okay. Stay with us. We'll continue with some of the First Liberty cases when we come back on Point of View.
America's founding was shaped by a biblical worldview, but you will rarely hear that truth today. Think about this. If your child or grandchild was asked to articulate how Christian values shaped America's founding based on the education they received in school and from popular media, could they do it? Well, you can be part of restoring an appreciation for America's godly heritage, and we need you. Truth Team Week is right around the corner, kicking off September 22nd, and you're invited to participate in Point of View's mission to restore America's godly heritage and a Christian worldview in this nation by joining the Truth Team. But you don't have to wait to make a difference. You can make a donation right now and learn more about the Truth Team by visiting us online at pointofview.net. or by calling 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, Dr. Merrill Matthews.
And back with our weekend edition. And Erin, President Trump has recognized some of your clients, I believe.
Yeah, so on Monday, the Religious Liberty Commission met for the second time for a hearing. They met at the Museum of the Bible in D.C., was where the event was hosted.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah, and so it looked from the videos that I saw to be a very great event, a great space. President Trump was extremely complimentary of the Museum of the Bible and what they're doing there. He donated the Trump Family Bible during his speech, which was, he had given it to them, but he, didn't hand it on stage, of course. But during he got up, talked about the importance of religious liberty in America, which is always encouraging to hear the president say publicly. He's been a great supporter of religious liberty, since
forming a commission
Ronald,
that Kelly's on.
Forming this commission that Kelly Shackelford is on, and many other notable people that are talking about, hey, what are we doing to protect religious liberty? We're going to advise the president on what kinds of things the president should be doing and the administration should be doing. But during his speech, he actually recognized two of our clients, one of which was Hannah Allen. She was a student that there had been an accident with another student that had gotten into a car wreck, and she wanted to pray during lunch with some of her friends. And she got in trouble for praying in the lunchroom with her friends. Hannah is now, despite being punished for exercising her religious beliefs, is serving our country very bravely in the United States Air Force. And so we were very proud to represent her and proud to continue to support her as she serves our country. And then he invited Shay Encinas up to speak, this is the student out in California that was forced to read with his kindergarten buddy the book My Shadow is Pink, and ask his kindergarten buddy about what gender this kindergartner believed that they were. They did an activity where you had to draw a shadow and color it in the color pink or blue. And Shay, this violates his religious beliefs and the beliefs of his parents, and so he had an issue that the school was making him do this. And so he got to go up and tell his story. He gave a brief snippet during Trump's speech. But if any of the listeners haven't watched the testimony of Shay or Hannah or Valerie, another student that got in trouble because she wanted to sing a Christian song during her talent show, their stories are compelling, and it also draws attention to the fact that, man, schools don't understand, by and large, what kinds of rights students actually have, the religious liberty of students. And so go watch that. I think probably DOJ, I believe, posted the last Religious Liberty Commission. I'm sure they posted this one as well. But we also had Jeremy testify before the Religious Liberty Commission, and so he got to talk about the state of the law and answer questions from the commission about things that we're seeing at First Liberty that our clients are dealing with, or things that we've dealt with in the past. And so it's very encouraging that they're interested in schools. I think the next hearing is about teachers and coaches. And so we'll get to hear more about what's going on in schools, the rights of teachers and coaches. And so, your listeners are aware, if they've been listening, about Marisol Castro and her wanting to hang the crucifix by her desk. She had it. She got in trouble. She was removed from her job and for having this crucifix up in her personal space. And so clearly teachers, coaches, students are having their religious liberty rights violated by the school districts. And so this is a great opportunity to educate the public and educate schools what they can and can't do. And if anyone has any questions, we have religious liberty protection kits on our website that talk about the rights of parents and students and teachers and coaches in schools. And those are readily available to every listener if they want to go to firstliberty.org and go find our protection kits.
Good. Jeff, we've had presidents who openly express faith. Jimmy Carter, expressed his faith in Christianity. Ronald Reagan did. George Bush did. President Obama did, though he went to a church that was a little bit more questionable in my guess. Nobody's ever accused Donald Trump of being a steady churchgoer. And yet, I think you could make the case he's done more for religious liberty than many of the people who professed and obviously lived a Christian faith.
No, I'll say this. I mean, Donald Trump has done more for religious liberty than any president in my lifetime.
Which is a long time.
Which is a long time.
Just
not as long as yours, but a long time.
Maybe so.
But no, I mean it's absolutely true. The focus on it. The putting the right people in the right positions who are able to do something. I mean, he's creating faith offices in every department of the federal government where someone's going in and their job is to monitor what's going on, what he's done in reversing the policies that the Biden administration had enacted, even going back to ones that Obama had enacted. And he didn't get to the first time. I mean, it is just tremendous. I mean, sometimes actions speak louder than words with regard to a commitment to faith. It's easy to say that you're pro-faith. It's something else when you take actions. And I think this presidential commission in itself, that the fact that he's got cabinet officers who are there attending hearings, the fact that he came to the hearing and highlighted an important issue, which is the right of students in public schools. Obviously we're blessed at First Liberty that Kelly Shackelford is on that. The only person on the committee that comes from a religious liberty law firm and has that type of expertise, and Kelly's working really hard on that committee, which at First Liberty, we're happy he's doing that. But of course, that pulls him away from other things. Mm-hmm. But it's important. And the other thing that I like, and we know about, when you have actionable goals, what are you always told? Well, you need to have a time period, right? It's just not go make America free again. Well, I mean, they're to do it by next July 4th. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have, and when you talk to Kelly about the commission, and they've got work to do. They've got work to do, and they're going to develop and make recommendations to the president. And Kelly's already doing that. I mean, they're working really hard. The other thing in DOJ, I mean, Attorney General Bondi, the emphasis on religion. I mean, we've been the benefactor of in several of our cases where the Department of Justice has weighed in our favor. Mm. And look, it does not hurt. In a case, we had a case that comes to mind. That we were picking on New York. Let's go back to California to pick on. We had a case in California where it's primarily an Asian American church wanting to occupy a piece of property to use as a church, and the city of Santa Ana says you can't do it. And we're like, well, do you know about this thing called the Constitution? What? The what? And then DOJ weighs in. By the way, do you guys know this thing about the Constitution? And they're like, oh, the Constitution. Oh, yeah. Well, we made a mistake. So, that helped us get that case resolved, DOJ's involvement. And there are others. I mean, other cases, I know Erin's been involved in some where DOJ has weighed in, and that didn't happen in the Biden administration. And unfortunately, it didn't always happen in prior Republican administrations either.
Where are the challenges now? There are 2 or 3 things that you said we need to try to address these issues here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Erin highlighted one. I think one of the big things is, we've had these great Supreme Court victories, which have restored, in so many places, restored religious freedom rights, and the public schools being one, but bringing along the administrators and the school district attorneys, it's as if it didn't happen. It's if these cases didn't happen. Like, I don't know how many times we write we hear about a situation, we write one of these letters, and they're like, Kennedy versus Bremerton? What's that about? Well, if you don't know your constitutional law, then you shouldn't be advising school districts. And we know a school board member who was who's not a lawyer, And she, during one of her meetings, I mean, they were talking about an issue about doing something that was clearly permissible. And this layperson brings up, well, what about the Kennedy case? Well, the what? Well, that might have some impact. Well, no, it answers the question. And so I think that we haven't, and that's what I love about the commission. And there's a lot of other things that they will be doing, but one is highlighting these issues so that people know what the law is and that they can actually go out and exercise your rights. And when somebody says you can't do that, say, no, that's baloney. That's baloney. You can do that.
We've got a number of issues that we've talked about today. We have links to these issues on pointofview.net, so you can go to Point of View and find out more about them, and especially the one on the SCOTUS blog on the tariffs and some of the things with Charlie Kirk, so I'd encourage you to do that. We'll be right back.
The Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce engagement has some people wondering, will marriage by the world's most famous millennial feminist accelerate the recent modest reversal of the decline in marriage rates? The Wall Street Journal's James Freeman wrote recently of a marriage comeback. He cites data that suggests that the decades-long decline in the proportion of Americans who are married may have reached its low point. Having hit that nadir during the pandemic, the 2023 marriage rate was higher than in any year since 2008. Could the Swift-Kelce union spawn a marriage boom? Certainly theirs is the ultimate capstone marriage, as described in a Washington Post column by Ramesh Ponnuru. He points to sociologist Andrew Cherlin's description of a trend in which the wedding is the last brick put in place in a good life. As nice as it is for a couple to have their financial ducks in a row before marriage, there are downsides for the couple and for the culture. According to Mr. Ponnuru, one is that fewer people get married. Not everyone achieves a capstone, and the people who do spend a smaller fraction of their lives married. Social scientists tell us married people are happier, and later marriages mean fewer children, often fewer than couples say they want. Of those, more are born outside of wedlock. In contrast, cornerstone marriage provides one of the first bricks of adulthood, where husband and wife do some of their growing up together. In our culture, well-educated, economically successful couples are the ones most likely to get married. But that Taylor Swift, an icon of female independence, will be married might just encourage a marriage boom, hopefully with more cornerstone marriages, perhaps even a baby boom. At age 35, if Taylor and Travis want kids, they ought to start soon. Travis's father, Ed Kelce, sounded optimistic when he spoke of the couple's shared values, strong work ethic, and future family goals. I'm rooting for them. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. If you were listening online, you got to hear Penna Dexter's latest commentary on the importance of marriage and the Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce engagement and whether or not that might encourage more people, young people. You know, we've had a bit of a dearth in young people marrying, that might encourage them to step up and get married. What do you think?
I don't think we can underestimate Taylor Swift's influence on young culture. She's shown the ability to spike voter registration.
Yes.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a peak or at least a somewhat steady growth in marriage proposals, at least. She's not even married yet. This is just an engagement. And so I hope that their marriage succeeds and is a wonderful union. Divorce rates nowadays are not encouraging.
Yeah.
And so you can get married all you like, but it takes work once you get there. And so, I think they, like every other couple beginning a marriage, they have their work cut out for them, especially with things like football schedule. Who knows how much longer that'll last? And Taylor Swift, just, she's going to release a new album. She's probably going to tour that one too.
Yeah.
But if we've seen anything from the Eras Tour, Travis Kelce will be there right in tow. And so it'll be interesting to watch. I was reading an article the other day about if they were to sell the TV rights to their wedding, which I don't think that they will do because they've been public but fairly private. But the expectation is that the TV rights for their wedding would pass Super Bowl TV rights and the TV rights of the royal wedding in the UK. And so who knows? It's just interesting to watch.
My understanding is the Chiefs' numbers, viewing numbers, go up significantly if Taylor's going to be in the booth watching the game, and just so people can see the camera go over and show her there. It's an amazing phenomenon.
I got in trouble last time we talked about Taylor Swift on the air, so I'm gonna take a pass. I'm gonna take a pass of my view, but it does bring up, and I think Penna's commentary brings up the concept about hopefully this encourages people to get married because marriage is a foundational institution, and I'm a father of an unmarried young lady sitting next here to an unmarried young lady. And I want to bring it back to Charlie Kirk because I think one thing that perhaps Charlie Kirk had started to do was engaging young men, and we know, and I think we've talked about before about the absence of good young men. I certainly hear it from my daughter, but we did hear young men returning to the church, and I think Charlie Kirk is somewhat part of that. I don't think that is attributable to Travis Kelce or Taylor Swift. But I do think Charlie Kirk is about that. And so I think of that. It starts with, if we're going to have a marriage boom, it's going to start with young men, getting back to church and, getting out of their parents' basement, stop maybe playing video games for a little while, and actually and getting off their phones and actually having meaningful conversations with people. And so I would say, again, full circle to our first segment and talking about the death of Charlie Kirk, is I think Charlie Kirk was part of that in encouraging young men just to do something. I think was part of that movement. That is a good movement. And I do agree with Penna. Look, if Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift cause more people to consider to be married, then that is a good thing. But I think it starts with young men getting back in church.
We're talking about young men. Of course, Charlie Kirk was at a university in Utah, and I just wanted to highlight the last thing that we have, the last item on our agenda today, the value of the Americans' place on college education. And this is a new Gallup poll that they've been tracking for some time, and it has declined. About 75% saw it as important to college education. It's down to 35% now. It's a huge drop in the number of people, of Americans, who think a college education is important. Now, it's important in part to me because that's where we're talking about marriage. Mm-hmm. That's where I met my future wife, was in college. And a lot of people do. You're sort of at that marrying age when you go to college and you're around a lot of people. But I'm just surprised that it doesn't surprise me that it would decline some, but that's a huge drop.
It is a huge drop, but I don't know if it's bad.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree.
I don't know if it's bad because I would tell you my generation, and maybe yours too, buddy. Aaron. I don't know. I'll let you speak for yourself. The expectation in my generation was everybody went to college. Mm-hmm. Everybody. And so I grew up in a little town in central Pennsylvania. Not everybody should have gone to college. And quite frankly, in mine, not everyone did. But there was an expectation. And now, I think for someone like me, that my parents, who neither went to college, would have two children, who did go to college. I went, and then my sister followed me, and there was in my house, I don't ever remember there not being an expectation that I would go to college. And I think in my case, that made sense. But for some people, I'll take my cousin. My cousin tried to go to college. He actually was recruited to play football, and then that didn't work out. He did not need to be in college. Now, he ended up going to technical school afterwards, and he's been very successful by doing that. And I do think, we need to, I think other countries do a better job of figuring out. And I don't mean this to be an elitist, because right. I didn't, again, my parents didn't go to college, but I clearly had the abilities to go to college. And I think that doesn't matter. But there are certain people who would be better and more to be a welder, to be a plumber. Nothing wrong with that. And trust me,
make good money.
Trust me, we have a plumbing issue right now at our house, and it's not major, but that person's going to make a lot of money for me fixing something that I have. And my wife said, couldn't we watch on YouTube? I'm like, I'll flood the house. No, we'll pay whatever they want. And she goes, well, they charge $100 just to once they walk through the door, it's $100 if it takes 1 second. Pay the money. We got to fix it.
Well, and that's been the case. It's during the Obama and Biden administrations, there was this push to try to, in essence, push people into college. And as you say, not everybody needs or wants to go, or maybe isn't suited for going to college. So it's been an effort that the Democrats have pushed, and I think it's probably a good deal that we're backing away from it a little bit. Don't have much time left. Tell our listeners about First Liberty.
Yeah, so it's going to be a crazy fall. We've got the Supreme Court argument, which will probably be in December, in our case defending evangelist Gabe Olivier, who was told to go in a corner of a park rather than actually be where the people were, so he can engage in his First Amendment rights. And so that is on top, and then, I don't know. We've got what's the numbers? Probably 100 or so active litigation cases, and just crazy. It keeps Erin busy.
Oh yeah, love it.
And when they go to First Liberty, there's a place to donate, I guess.
We would love to have people support at firstliberty.org.
And you can go to pointofview.net and donate to Point of View. It takes your money to be able to keep us on the air. This is an important ministry, and we appreciate all your support. I'd like to thank Doug in there doing the engineering for us today, and Steve was over here doing the producing. And I'd like to thank you for coming and joining us as a listener, because we here to try to just provide information, education, other things that you won't hear in the mainstream media. So thank you for joining us here on Point of View. I think Kirby will be back on Monday, so I hope you'll join us then.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer. And that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.